Next, we're going to go to one of the websites that you can use to download 3D models, which you can bring into the slicer and prepare for 3D printing. So I'll show that workflow. We're going to navigate to Printables.com, and on the search bar up here, you're going to click on it, and then you're going to type NCC gear. You'll see this orange gear here. I'll go ahead and click on that, and that's going to take you to the page. Now, take some time to go over the different tabs here, but briefly I'll go through some of the main items. The main part here that you're going to want to take note of is the different tabs right here on the middle of the page. The Details tab is very important that you read it, because many times the designer will give some instruction on how best to print the design. And then we have the Files tab, which contains the downloadable files. Makes and comments over here. The nice thing about this section is it allows, after a person prints the design, they can take a picture of it and upload it. And it serves as a way of proving that this design is actually 3D printable and that it works. Now, these are the main three tabs you want to take note of. Okay, let's click on the Details tab here, and over here you've got some instructions that we're going to follow in order to recreate this part. So I can see here it says carefully follow these instructions. Print the gear on the flat side on the build plate, the side with no rounded corners. And if we take a look at the picture here, you'll notice that it's got a fillet on one side and the other side is flat. Other image on the right here, we can see that we have a 3D viewer option that pops up, and if we click on that, you can actually take the model and rotate it around. So here we can actually see that it's got a rounded side here, and on the back it's flat. So this is a nice little addition to the website here, that you can actually orbit around the part and get a closer look at all the different sides in more details. Okay, I'm going to click on the X here on the top right to close it. Let's take a look at some of the additional instructions. It wants us to scale to 50%, set infill to 10%, set the material to PLA, set the printing resolution to 0.25, and it says after printing, show model to the instructor in order to be added to the 3D printing certification list. All right, let's do all these things. We'll open up PrusaSlicer on the laptop, and the icon looks something like this. And here we're going to bring in our design by clicking on the little add button here on the top toolbar, and then we're going to navigate to find our STL file and then click open. And it comes in this orientation. Now I'll briefly go through some of the main menu items here. If I click on the model itself, you can see it turns green. I've got a top menu bar and a side menu bar here. Now the first set of instructions says to print the gear with a flat side on the build plate. So let's go ahead and do that. If I click on the gear, there's a button here on the left side that says place on face. And if I click on that, you can see that it looks for all the flat faces and highlights them, and all I have to do is simply click on those to get it to position on the build plate. So if I click on here, it'll lay it flat, but you can see the problem there is that's not the flat side, that's the rounded side. So if I click on it again, the place on face, if I click on one of these top faces there, you can see it went upside down. Again, not what I want, and in fact I want this face here to be on the bed, so I'm going to click on it one more time and choose that side. So all you do is you click on the face that you want and it'll orient it right on the bed. All right, perfect. Let's go on to the next item, which says scale to 50%. Now the easiest way to scale is to click on the model, and you're going to get this box over here. One thing to take note is you have this button here, the little lock, that if it turns orange, if you click it, it shows that the lock unlocks and that it locks. That's the button to keep your scale factor in place and not distort the item. Now I can scale by either choosing a percentage or giving it a specific dimension here. Now because this button is checked that it's going to keep the aspect ratio, I can click on any one of these and I can scale it. If I wanted to increase it by 200% or by 2 times the size, I can type 200 on the X and it'll scale it. I can click the undo button to undo that. Now, if I have this button unchecked and I click, let's say in the Z direction, and go ahead and let's make it really obvious. I'll say 500%. You can see that it distorts it. It allows it to be thicker, but only change that specific direction and not the rest. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. The other option too you have here, I'm going to go ahead and click to close the little lock there. Most of the times you're going to want to keep that aspect ratio. If I know that I want this to be a specific size, let's say in the X direction, the X is going to be your red here in the front, Y is front to back, the green direction, and Z is your blue up and down. And let's say I wanted this to be a very specific dimension, let's say 95 millimeters in the X. I can go ahead and click on that or type that in, and you can see it'll scale. Let's go ahead and undo all that, bring it back to 100%. And the scale factor that was required by the directions were 50%. So I'm going to type 50 and hit enter, and it's down to 50%. And I can see that the size there, if I look in the Z direction, that's 5 millimeters tall. You also have the option to change it to inches by just clicking on the inches box here. Okay, the next set of instructions says to set the infill to 10%. In order to do that, we're going to go right here where it says infill. We can click here on the drop down arrow and choose one of the preset infills here, or we can just type one right here. So I'll simply click, choose 10%, and there we have it. Let's see what the next option is, set the material to PLA. In order to do that, I'm going to click on the material here or the filament drop down area, and I'm going to choose generic PLA. Okay, and now that's set. Let's look at the next option. Set printing resolution to 0.25 millimeters. We'll go ahead and change that as well. In order to do that, I'm going to go to print setting here, click on this little drop down arrow, and I'm going to choose one of the predefined resolutions. I can see right here 0.25, that's the draft setting. I'll click on that. And after I've completed my settings, I can go ahead and click on slice now. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can see the different layers. And it's always good practice to take this little slider here, bring it down, and this will show you layer by layer what the model is going to look like as it prints. It's a good idea to go ahead and do that because if there are any errors, it's a lot faster to catch them here than to find a failed print. Okay, now we can click on Export G-Code, and you're going to save it to the SD card that you'll grab from the printer and insert into the laptops. And after saving it, you'll eject the SD card, bring it to the printer, and we can print our parts.